It was the kind of rain that Nairobi sends when it wants to make a point. The kind that arrives without warning, turns every street into a river, and makes the city feel like it has decided to start over from scratch and is not particularly concerned about the people still living in it. Lara Burowo had been asleep for exactly 40 minutes when the knock came. 3 knocks. Deliberate. Not frantic. Not the knock of someone panicking. The knock of someone who had assessed the situation, calculated that knocking was the correct next step, and executed it with the specific controlled precision of a man who did not allow circumstances to determine his composure. She lay still for a moment. Told herself she had imagined it. The knock came again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm. Same deliberateness. Like a request rather than a demand. Like a man who understood that the door belonged to someone else and was asking rather than taking. She got up. She opened the door. And standing on the other side of it, soaking wet, bleeding from a cut above his left ear, with the specific contained stillness of a man who had decided that showing fear was not available to him regardless of the circumstances, was the most dangerous man in Seoul. She did not know that yet. She only knew he was tall and injured, and it was raining, and her mother had raised her a specific way. So she let him in. By morning, 12 black cars were parked on her street. And Lara Burowo was about to understand that one decision made at midnight in the rain had changed the entire accounting of her life. Welcome to Afro Soul Connect. On today's episode, you get a dose of culture clash, forbidden love, family pressure, power dynamics, and an unforgettable story about a primary school teacher from Nairobi and the most feared man in Seoul. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification icon so you never miss a new story when it drops. Also tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's go back to the beginning. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand 2 things. You have to understand Lara Burowo. And you have to understand what kind of night it was for Kong Tae-jin before he ended up at her door. Start with Lara. Lara Burowo was 25 years old, a primary school teacher at St. Catherine's Academy in Kilimani, and the kind of woman who made a specific quality of impression on people. Not immediately, but permanently. She was not the loudest person in any room. She was the person you remembered longest after leaving it. She had grown up in Eldoret as the only girl in a family of 5 children, which meant she had spent her entire childhood and adolescence being the one who held things together while the 4 of them, Michael, Daniel, Emmanuel, and baby Kevin, who was now 22 and not remotely a baby, took things apart. She had learned to read a room before she entered it. She had learned to stay calm when everyone around her was not. She had learned that the most useful thing you could do in a crisis was assess it honestly and then act. She had also learned, from 4 brothers who treated dislocated shoulders and broken fingers as minor inconveniences to be corrected before Mama found out, how to put a joint back in place with her hands. She had moved to Nairobi at 22 for her teaching position. 3rd floor of a building in Kilimani where the elevator worked on Tuesdays and Fridays and no other days, in a 1-bedroom apartment that she had made specifically and deliberately hers, a shelf of books along the entire eastern wall, a small kitchen that smelled on Sunday evenings of whatever she had decided to cook for the week, curtains she had bought in Jacamba Market and hemmed herself, a small balcony where she kept 3 plants that she talked to when she thought no one could hear. She called her mother every Saturday at 9 in the morning. She had a specific coffee cup she used only on school mornings. She trusted slowly and completely, and she had not opened her door after 10 o'clock at night since the incident with the downstairs neighbor's cousin in 2021 that she did not particularly want to think about. She opened it that night because of the specific quality of the knock. She had grown up with 4 brothers. She knew the difference between a knock that wanted something and a knock that needed something. This knock needed something. And whatever it needed, it was not going to take it by force. So she opened the door. And there he was. Kong Tae-jin was 36 years old and the head of an organization that the people who knew about it did not discuss openly, and the people who did not know about it were better off for not knowing. He had rebuilt what his father left him at 28, a shell of a structure, damaged by the specific kind of betrayal that only long-time associates can execute, and had spent 8 years building it into something so precise and so self-sufficient that it required almost nothing from him except decisions. He was good at decisions. He was less good at the specific kind of problem he had encountered that evening, which was the problem of a Lagos acquisition deal. He had been expanding his organization's West African logistics infrastructure, and Nairobi was the next piece. going catastrophically wrong at 9 in the evening when his security detail was compromised by a rival organization that had been tracking his movements for 3 weeks without his knowledge. His driver had been taken. His phone had been destroyed. His 2 remaining security personnel had separated from him in the confusion to draw the pursuing vehicles away, which had worked and left him alone and bleeding in a Nairobi neighborhood he did not know, with a dislocated left shoulder and no operational infrastructure. He had assessed the situation. He had calculated the available options. He had rejected the hotel, too exposed, too traceable. He had rejected calling from a public phone. His organization's emergency contact protocol required a specific encrypted sequence he could not execute from an unverified line. He had calculated that he needed 6 hours of shelter and concealment before his people could locate him through the secondary tracking protocol that activated automatically at the 4-hour mark. He needed a door. Any door. He chose hers because the light under it was the only light he could see on the entire 3rd floor. Because it meant someone was awake. Because a person who was awake at midnight in the rain was less likely to be in the deep sleep that produced the specific groggy alarm that produced calls to security that produced complications he did not have the capacity to manage with a dislocated shoulder. He knocked 3 times. He made the knock the specific kind of knock that communicated request rather than threat because he had assessed the situation and understood that whoever opened this door had no reason to trust him and every reason not to. He needed them to open the door. The knock was the first communication. It had to be correct. It was correct. She opened the door. She looked at him for approximately 3 seconds. The specific 3-second assessment of a woman who grew up with 4 brothers and has developed the instinct for reading what a situation actually is rather than what it looks like. And then she stepped back and said, in English, with the specific calm of a woman who had already decided, "Come in before you drown." He came in. He stood in her small entrance hallway, water running from his jacket onto her floor, and looked at her with the specific careful quality of a man who needed to understand what he was dealing with before he said anything. She was looking at his shoulder. "That is dislocated," she said. "Yes." "Left shoulder." "Yes." She looked at him for 1 more second. Then she said, "Sit down. There, on the chair. Take the jacket off." He sat. He took the jacket off, which required a specific careful maneuvering that she watched with the clinical attention of someone assessing the degree of the dislocation. "How long?" Lara asked. "Approximately 90 minutes. She nodded. She went to the kitchen. She came back with a dish towel rolled into a tight cylinder. She stood in front of him. "I grew up with 4 brothers," she said. "I have done this before. It will hurt for about 2 seconds, and then it will not hurt anymore. Do not move." He looked at her. He had not been spoken to like that, with that specific matter-of-fact authority that acknowledged his pain and simultaneously declined to be concerned about it beyond the practical, in longer than he could calculate. "All right," he said. She put the rolled towel in his hand and told him to hold it and brace against it when she told him to. She positioned her hands on his shoulder with the specific practiced confidence of someone who had done this in a Eldoret living room while her mother was still at the market and could not find out. "Now," she said. He held the towel. She applied the specific movement. The shoulder went back. He made no sound. She stepped back and assessed her work. "Good." She was satisfied. "You will need to keep it still for tonight. Can you move your fingers?" He moved his fingers. "Good," Lara repeated. And she went back to the kitchen. He sat in her chair and looked at his shoulder and at the room around him and felt something he was not going to categorize yet, because categorizing things in the field before you had sufficient information was how you made errors. She came back with a bowl of something that smelled like, he had no reference for it. His entire catalog of food smell was Korean, with a small section of Japanese and Chinese from operational dinners, like meat and something deep and warm and specific. "Ugali and beef stew," she said, setting it on the small table beside the chair. "Eat." He looked at the bowl. "I do not want to take your food." "You are not taking it," she said. "I am giving it. There is a difference, and one of them is rude, and it is not the giving." He looked at her. He picked up the spoon. He ate. He ate the way a man eats when he has not had a home-cooked meal in 11 years, and his body has been running on organizational dinners and convenience, and the specific tastelessness of food consumed in transit. He ate with the involuntary focused attention of someone encountering something that is not just nourishment but a reminder that nourishment used to mean something different than fuel. He ate the whole bowl. She had been watching from the kitchen doorway with the specific expression of a woman who has fed 4 brothers and understands what it means when a man eats like that. She came and took the bowl without saying anything about it. When she came back she had a blanket and a pillow and the specific purposeful efficiency of a woman implementing a plan she had already made. "The couch," she said, arranging the pillow at one end. "Keep the shoulders still. Don't touch anything in the kitchen. The bathroom is through there. I have a class at 7:15, so I will be up at 5:30. You can stay until 5. He looked at her from the chair. "I don't know your name," he said. "Lara," simply said. "Lara." "Yes." She turned toward the bedroom. "Don't touch the plants on the balcony either. They don't like strangers." She went to bed. He sat in the chair for a long time before he moved to the couch. He lay on her couch in her small Nairobi apartment with the blanket she had given him and looked at the ceiling and listened to the rain come down outside and felt something he was absolutely not going to categorize tonight or possibly ever. He had been in more dangerous situations than this. He had been in situations that required more calculation and more precision and more of the specific cold management that 15 years of organizational leadership had installed in him like a second set of instincts. None of those situations had ended with someone putting his shoulder back and giving him ugali and telling him not to touch the plants. He was asleep within 8 minutes. He had not slept like that. The specific quality of sleep that arrives when your body has finally decided the space it is in safe, in longer than he could calculate. He was awake at 4:45. He dressed in the clothes she had given him. His driver's spare set from the vehicle kit, which she had produced without comment when he explained he was soaking through, because apparently she kept spare men's clothing and apparently she did not find this worth explaining, and he stood in her small kitchen for a moment before he left. He looked at the 3 plants through the balcony door. He looked at the shelf of books on the eastern wall. He looked at the specific coffee cup on the counter that was positioned at a specific angle that said it was used every morning and had its place. He left an envelope on the kitchen table. He went down 3 flights of stairs, the elevator was not working, and out into the pre-dawn Nairobi street and activated the secondary tracking protocol on the emergency devices operational team always sewed into the lining of his jacket. By 6:15, his people had him. By 7:30, 12 black cars were parked on her street. Lara woke at 5:30 as promised. She moved through her morning routine with a specific efficient automation of a woman who has done the same things in the same order for long enough that her body does them before her mind is fully present. Coffee cup to the counter, kettle on, wash face, check phone, pour coffee, drink it standing at the kitchen window looking at the street below while the apartment woke up around her. She noted the blanket folded neatly on the couch. She noted the pillow placed back exactly as it had been. She noted the bowl she had washed and left on the drying rack. He had washed his own bowl. At some point in the night, he had washed his own bowl. She noted all of this with the specific attention she gave to things that told her something about a person. Then she saw the envelope on the kitchen table. She opened it. Inside was more money than she made in 4 months. Kenyan shillings, organized into neat denominations. No note. No name. No explanation. She stood in her kitchen at 5:45 in the morning and looked at the money for a long time. Then she put it back in the envelope and put the envelope in the drawer under the counter and went to get ready for school. She did not think about it on the walk to St. Catherine's. She did not think about it through her 7:15 class, which was standard 3 and required the specific full-body attention of a woman managing 26 8-year-olds who had collectively decided that Tuesday was the day to test every boundary she had established. She did not think about it through the staff meeting at 11 or the parent call at 2 or the marking she did at her desk between 3 and 4. She thought about it at 4:15 when she stepped outside the school gate and saw that the street in front of her building, visible from the school's front steps if you knew where to look, which she did because she walked this route every day, had 12 black cars parked on it. She stopped walking. She stood on the school steps and counted them. 12. Then she started walking again. Because she was Lara Burowo and she had grown up with 4 brothers and she had assessed the situation and understood that standing on school steps staring at 12 black cars was not the most useful response available to her. She walked to her building. She walked up 3 flights of stairs. The elevator was not working. She went into her apartment. She stood at the window and looked down at the street. The cars were still there. Expensive. Black. Nairobi plates on some of them, plates she did not recognize on others. Men in suits standing at intervals. Not aggressive. Not causing disturbance. Simply present, in the way that things that belong to significant power are present, quietly and without apology. She stood at the window for 4 minutes. Then she went to the kitchen drawer. She took out the envelope. She held it for a moment. Then she put it in a fresh envelope, sealed it, and wrote on the outside in her specific teacher's handwriting, "Return to sender." She did not know where to send it yet. She put it on the shelf next to her books and went to cook dinner. By 7 that evening, the cars were gone. Meanwhile, in a private residence in Nairobi's Westlands neighborhood that had been secured and swept and staffed within 3 hours of his extraction, Kong Tae-jin was conducting the specific kind of debrief that happened after a significant operational failure. The deal was recoverable. The security breach had been contained. The rival organization responsible had been identified within 6 hours. The personnel who had been taken had been located and returned, significantly the worse for wear but alive. The acquisition target remained viable. The debrief was thorough. Tae-jin ran it with the same cold precision he brought to everything, cataloging every failure point, assigning accountability with the specific fairness of a man who did not make operational failures personal but made them educational. It took 3 hours. When it was done, Huang, his operations director, who had been with him since the beginning and was the only person in the organization who spoke to him with anything approaching candor, said, "The civilian. The apartment on the 3rd floor. What about her? We need to assess whether she requires any." "No," Tae-jin said. Huang was quiet for a moment. "She has seen your face. She has seen a man who needed help and received it. She does not know who I am. She does not know what I am. She put my shoulder back, gave me food, and told me not to touch her plants. She is not a security risk." Huang looked at him for a moment with the specific expression of a man deciding whether what he is hearing is operational assessment or something else. He decided not to pursue it. "The envelope," Huang said. "Left it on the table." "How much?" Tae-jin told him. Huang nodded slowly. "Generous. It was what I had available." A pause. "She fed me the whole pot. It was the least appropriate response I could calculate." Huang said nothing about this. Tae-jin looked at the operational documents on the table in front of him. "We return to Seoul tomorrow. The Nairobi acquisition proceeds on schedule. There is nothing else to address here." Huang said nothing. Tae-jin returned to Seoul the following morning. He thought about the ugali on the flight home. He thought about it on the flight and then he stopped thinking about it because that was a choice available to him and he was going to make it. He thought about it the following Thursday at a dinner in Gangnam where the food was extraordinary and prepared by a chef with 3 international recognitions and cost more per plate than Lara Burowo made in a week, and it tasted like nothing in particular. He stopped thinking about it again. 3 months passed. Tae-jin's life returned to its specific precise routine. The Seoul operation, the weekly assessments, the expansion into the Vietnamese market, the quarterly review of the entire organizational structure that he conducted himself because he did not trust precision to anyone who had not built the thing being measured. He did not think about Nairobi. He thought about Nairobi approximately once per day in the specific unbidden way that things arrive when you have told your mind not to produce them and your mind has decided to disagree. On the 43rd day, he called Huang into his office and told him to find out her full name and her employer. Huang found out within 6 hours. He placed the information on Tae-jin's desk without comment. Lara Burowo. St. Catherine's Academy, Kilimani. Standard 3 class teacher. 25 years old. No criminal record. No organizational affiliations. No outstanding debts. No complications. Tae-jin read the file. He closed it. He put it in the drawer. On the 51st day, he told Huang to arrange a delivery to St. Catherine's Academy. A donation to the school's library fund, significant, anonymous, specifically targeted at the acquisition of science and mathematics materials for the lower primary classes because Huang had done sufficient research to know that Standard 3 was lower primary and mathematics resources in Nairobi primary schools were chronically underfunded. He framed this to himself as a debt being serviced. He had used her apartment. He had eaten her food. The operational envelope was apparently insufficient. He had calculated this from the fact that she had not spent it on anything identifiable in the 6 weeks since he had left it. Which meant she had not spent it. Which meant she did not want it. He did not examine this too closely. He arranged the library donation. He arranged, through a separate channel 2 weeks later, for her mother's chronic back condition, which Huang had discovered through medical records he was absolutely not supposed to have access to be assessed by the best physiotherapist in Eldoret. He told himself this was also a debt. On the 78th day, Huang came to his office with an expression that Tae-jin had learned, over 8 years, to read as the expression of a man delivering information he expects will produce an uncomfortable response. "The envelope," Huang said. Tae-jin looked at him. Huang placed the envelope on the desk. The original envelope. Unopened. With his organization's anonymous Nairobi correspondence address, routed through 4 intermediaries, written on the front in a specific teacher's handwriting. Return to sender. Tae-jin looked at the envelope for a long time. "She found the address," he said. She was apparently quite determined. "It took her 3 weeks. A pause. "There is a note inside." Tae-jin opened the envelope. The money was inside, exactly as he had left it, still in its original denominations. The note was written on a piece of lined school paper, the kind standard 3 students used, in the same teacher's handwriting. "I do not know who you are. I do not know what the money is for. I helped you because it was raining and you needed help, and I was raised to be the kind of person who opens the door. That is not a transaction. Please stop trying to make it one." Tae-jin read the note. He read it again. He placed it on his desk and looked at it for a specific amount of time that Huang, standing in the doorway, noted was longer than Tae-jin looked at almost anything. "The library donation," Tae-jin said. "Already delivered. She cannot return that one. And the physiotherapist. Her mother has attended 2 sessions. She believes it was arranged by a community health initiative." Tae-jin nodded. He picked up the note. He put it in his desk drawer. The specific drawer where he kept the 4 things in his entire organizational life that he considered genuinely irreplaceable. The drawer that Huang had keys to only for emergency extraction purposes. "Send a representative," he said, "to Nairobi. Within the week. Take an offer, the position at the international school, the apartment, the full package. Present it clearly and professionally. Give her time to consider." Huang wrote this down. "And Huang," Tae-jin said. "Sir. Brief them on exactly who they are speaking to. She is not someone to be pressured or managed. She is to be spoken to directly and honestly. If she says no, they accept the no and they come home." The representative went. Lara heard the offer. International school position in Seoul, furnished apartment, salary that made her current salary look like pocket money, full relocation support, with the specific listening quality she brought to everything. Completely, without interrupting, with the particular stillness of a woman who was not going to respond until she had understood every part of what was being said. When the representative finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Who sent you? I am not in a position to. You are sitting in my living room making me a significant offer on behalf of someone I do not know. I think you are very much in a position to tell me who sent you." The representative, who had been briefed that this was not someone to be pressured or managed, shifted in his chair. "I cannot give you a name," he said. "I can tell you that the person who sent me wants to repay a debt he feels he owes you." Lara looked at him for a long moment. She got up. She went to the kitchen. She came back with the representative's untouched tea and placed it in front of him. "Tell whoever sent you," she said, sitting down with the specific settled quality of a woman who has made a decision and is delivering it clearly, "that I understand the gesture. I understand that it is well-intentioned. But I did not help a person in the rain so that I could receive something in return. That is not why I do things. If I am going to go to Seoul, and I am not saying I am, it will be because I have chosen to go. Not because someone has arranged it for me." She paused. "The answer is no. Please thank him for the offer." The representative called Tae-jin from the car. Tae-jin listened to the full report. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She said it herself. Sir, if I am going to go to Seoul." He paused. She did not say she would not go. She said she would not go because it had been arranged. A longer pause. "Book me on the next flight to Nairobi. I am going myself." Huang, listening from the doorway of the office, said nothing. He went to book the flight. It was raining in Nairobi when Tae-jin arrived. He was not sure if this was the city cooperating with the symbolism or simply the city being itself. Nairobi did not particularly adjust its weather for anyone's dramatic requirements. It rained when it wanted to rain. Tonight it wanted to rain. He had come without the convoy this time. 2 security personnel, both in civilian clothes, positioned at intervals he had specified. He had come without the suit. Dark jacket, plain dark shirt, dark trousers. Nothing that communicated position. He had thought about this carefully and had decided that showing up to her door in the full infrastructure of who he was would be the precise wrong choice. He walked up 3 flights of stairs. The elevator was not working. He stood in front of her door. He knocked 3 times. The same rhythm. He was aware this was the same rhythm. He had not made it the same deliberately. It had simply arrived from the same place the first knock had come from, which was the specific calculation of a man who understood that a door belonged to someone else and was asking rather than taking. The door opened. She looked at him for a long moment. She was wearing a teaching outfit still, fitted dark trousers, a patterned blouse in deep burgundy and gold, so she had not been home long. Her hair was in a neat bun. She was holding a marking pen she had clearly been using before the knock. She looked at him. She looked at the street below. No convoy of cars, nothing visible, and then back at him. "I told your person no," she said. "I know," he said. "I did not come to ask again. I came to understand why." She looked at him for a long moment. It was raining behind him. The same rain as before, the kind that Nairobi sends when it wants to make a point. She stepped back from the door. "Wipe your feet," she said. "And don't drip on the books." He came in. He wiped his feet on the mat with the specific care of a man who had been told specifically what was expected. She went to the kitchen. He heard the kettle go on. He stood in the entrance hallway and looked at the apartment. The same shelf of books along the eastern wall. The same small kitchen visible through the doorway. The same 3 plants on the balcony. He could see them through the glass. They looked well maintained. She came back with 2 cups of tea and set them on the small table and sat in the chair he had sat in before, with his jacket dripping and his shoulder out, and gestured at the couch. He sat on the couch. "Your name," she said. "Real one." He looked at her. "Kong Tae-jin." "And what you do." He looked at her for a moment. He had calculated this. What to say, how much to say, the specific calibration of honesty required for this particular conversation. He had decided on the full version because she was the kind of person who would understand a partial version was partial and who would find the partiality more concerning than the truth. "I run an organization," he said. "Private. The nature of its operations is not entirely within what most governments would consider acceptable parameters." She held her tea in both hands and looked at him with a specific listening quality he remembered from the first night. "That is a very precise way of saying something that most people would say differently," she said. "I am a precise person. I noticed." She looked at him. "The library donation." He held her gaze. "Yes." "And my mother's physiotherapist." He held her gaze. "Yes." "She thinks it was a community health initiative." It was easier that way. Lara was quiet for a moment. She was not angry. He had prepared himself for anger and was finding instead the specific careful quality of a woman processing information and deciding what to do with it. "You did not need to do any of that," she said. "I owed a debt. I told you in the letter. It was not a transaction. I know what you told me in the letter." He held her gaze. "I did not arrange those things to repay a debt. I arranged them because they were things that needed arranging and I had the capacity to arrange them. The debt framing was easier to understand than the actual reason. What is the actual reason? He was quiet for a moment. You put my shoulder back, he said. You fed me. You gave me a couch and a blanket and told me not to touch your plants, and you did not ask me a single question about who I was or what had happened or why I was bleeding in your hallway at midnight. You treated me like a person. He paused. I have a specific and significant number of people in my life. None of them treat me like a person. They treat me like a position. The person who runs the organization. The person who makes the decisions. The person who rebuilt the thing after it was broken. He looked at her. You did not know any of that. You saw a man in the rain who needed help and you helped him. That is not something I have encountered in a very long time. I did not know how to leave it alone. The apartment was quiet. Lara held her tea and looked at him with the specific expression of a woman who is receiving information she had not expected in a form she had not anticipated and is deciding, with a quiet precision she brought to everything, what it means and what to do with it. How long did you think about coming here yourself? She asked. 78 days, he said. She looked at him. You counted. I am a precise person, he said. Something happened to her expression then. Something very small and very specific. The kind of thing that a woman with her particular quality of composure produced before the full weight of the thing arrived. She looked at her tea. The representative said the position is real, she said. The international school. Yes, it is real. It remains available if you choose it. But that is not why I am here. Why are you here? He looked at her directly. Because you mailed the money back, and the only kind of person who mails money back is the kind of person I have not met before, and I needed to understand who you are. The rain came down outside. I am a primary school teacher in Kilimani, she said. I know. I make a reasonable salary, my elevator does not work, I have 3 plants and a coffee cup and 4 brothers who call me on their own schedule, which is not a schedule I would describe as reliable. I open my door to people in the rain because my mother raised me that way, and I have not found a compelling reason to stop. I know all of that. And you still came. Yes. She looked at him for a long time. You can stay for dinner, she said. If you want to understand who I am, you will need to see me in my kitchen. That is where I am most myself. He looked at her. All right, he said. She got up and went to the kitchen, and he heard the specific sounds of a woman who was entirely at home in her own space beginning to cook, and he sat on her couch and felt something that he was still not going to categorize but was rapidly becoming impossible to avoid naming. He stayed for 3 days. Not on the couch. She arranged for him to stay at a guest house 2 streets away that her colleague's family ran, because she was very clear that she was not running a hotel, and also she had boundaries and he had better understand them from the beginning. But he was at her apartment from 7 in the morning until 9 in the evening on each of those 3 days, and he was in her world in the specific way she had offered. Completely, honestly, without the infrastructure of who he was. She showed him Nairobi. Not the Nairobi that his advanced team had mapped for operational purposes. Not the hotel districts and the financial centers and the road logistics. Her Nairobi. The market where her mother's recipe for the specific beef stew required a spice available only at one specific stall on the 2nd row. The school gate and the sound of Standard 3 at morning assembly. The coffee place on the corner where the owner knew her order and had it ready before she reached the counter. The route home from school that went past the park where she sat on the bench and marked papers when the apartment felt too small. He walked through all of it beside her. On the 2nd day she took him to the school. Not during hours. After the children had left, in the specific quiet of a primary school in the late afternoon when the chairs were up on the desks and the day's work was still visible on the chalkboard. She showed him her classroom with the specific ease of a woman entirely at home in the thing she had chosen. He stood in the doorway and looked at the small chairs and the chalkboard and the drawings on the wall. Standard 3's interpretation of the water cycle, rendered in crayon with varying degrees of scientific accuracy, and felt something that he was going to have to name eventually. You love it, he said. Yes, she said. Simply. You are good at it. I am very good at it. Not arrogance. The specific matter-of-fact confidence of a woman who knows the quality of her own work. They learn things in this room that they will carry for the rest of their lives. That is not a small thing. He looked at the water cycle drawings. "No," he said. "It is not a small thing." On the third evening she made him sit at the kitchen table while she cooked, and they talked in the specific way they had arrived at over 3 days. Directly, without performance, with a particular quality of two people who had discovered that honesty was easier between them than it was anywhere else in either of their lives. She asked him about his father. He told her. The full version, not the organizational summary, the actual version. The betrayal at 22. The collapse. The 8 years of rebuilding. The specific loneliness of building something so precise that it left no room for anything unintentional. She listened the way she listened to everything. Completely. Without interruption. When he finished, she said, "You built a structure with no load-bearing walls." He looked at her. "Architecturally," she said, "the most stable buildings are not the ones that look the most solid. They are the ones with the right internal structure. The ones that can absorb pressure from outside because they are correctly assembled inside." She stirred the pot. "You have spent 8 years making the outside very solid. But I think you left out some of the interior work." He looked at her for a long time. "I think you are right," he said. She served the food. He ate the whole pot again. She noticed. She said nothing about it. She simply filed it, in the specific way she filed everything. Completely, without drama, in the permanent record she kept of the things that told her who a person was. On the morning of the 4th day, he had to leave. He stood in her doorway, the same doorway, 3rd floor, elevator still not working, and looked at her with the specific quality of a man who has found something he did not know he was looking for and is calculating the cost of the distance between what he has found and where he has to go. "The position at the school remains available," he said. "I know," Lara responded. "I am not asking you to take it. I know that too." He looked at her. "May I come back?" he inquired. She looked at him for a long moment. "You may," she said. "But call first. And bring the ugali flour. I used the last of it on you." Something happened to his expression that was the specific involuntary quality of a man encountering something that gets past the 15 years of controlled management and simply arrives. "I will bring the flour," he said. He went down 3 flights of stairs. He got into the waiting vehicle. He looked at the building as the car pulled away. He called Huang. "Clear my schedule for the first week of next month," he said. Huang was quiet for a moment. "May I ask for what purpose?" "Nairobi," Taejin said. And he ended the call. He came back the following month as promised. And the month after that. And the month after that. Each time he called ahead. Each time he brought things. Not money, not offers, not organizational resources. The ugali flour. A specific Korean spice paste she had mentioned once, and he had remembered. Books for her classroom library. A replacement pot because he had knocked her existing one off the stove on his 3rd visit and broken the handle, and she had been very clear about the replacement requirements. Each time he stayed for 3 days. Each time the 2 security personnel were in civilian clothes at the specified intervals, and the guest house 2 streets away had his reservation, and each time he sat at her kitchen table from 7 in the morning until 9 in the evening, and they were in each other's worlds in the specific way that 2 precise people build something. Carefully, incrementally, with the specific attention to load-bearing elements that makes the difference between something real and something that simply looks real. Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you think Lara should go to Seoul? Or do you think Taejin should be the one doing all the moving? And which moment got you the most? The ugali, the mailed money, or I came to understand why? Tell me your city and tell me what you think. Now let's get back to the story. He told her he loved her in her kitchen on the 5th visit. Not with ceremony. With the specific plainness of a man who has calculated that the most important things require the most direct language and everything else is decoration. "I love you," he said, while she was stirring the pot. In the specific way that he said everything that was true, without management, without the performance of the saying, simply the fact delivered in the right language. She stopped stirring. She turned around. She looked at him for a long moment. "I know," Lara affirmed. He looked at her. "You know." "I have known since the 3rd visit when you brought a replacement pot and the exact specifications I had described. You do not remember the exact specifications of things you do not care about." She turned back to the stove. I love you too. The stew needs 3 more minutes. He sat at the kitchen table and felt the specific completeness of a structure that has finally received the element it was always going to need. But the world outside Lara's kitchen did not adjust itself to accommodate what was being built inside it. Taejean's 6th trip to Nairobi was supposed to be routine. It was not. On the 3rd day, Huang called him with a specific tone. Flat, controlled, with the quality of a man delivering information that requires the person receiving it to be completely still, that Taejean had learned to recognize as the tone reserved for the most serious category of problem. There is a situation, Huang said. Tell me. Beck's faction. Beck was an internal rival, a senior associate who had been building a quiet opposition within the organization for 14 months. They have conducted research on your Nairobi visits. Taejean was very still. They know about her, Huang said. The silence lasted 4 seconds. How much do they know? Name. School. Address. Your visit schedule. A pause. They have reached out to a contact in Nairobi. We believe they intend to use her as leverage to force your compliance on the Busan restructuring. Taejean looked at the kitchen table. Lara was in the bedroom getting ready for school. He could hear the specific sounds of her morning, the running water, the particular drawer that stuck and required the specific lift and pull, the small radio she turned on for 10 minutes every morning while she chose what to wear. They have not approached her yet? Not yet. We have a window. Small. What do they want from the Busan restructuring? Huang told him. He listened. He assessed. He calculated. He knew what the calculation produced before it was finished. He had known, sitting in this kitchen for 6 months of Nairobi visits, that this calculation was always available. The specific cost of caring about something, which was that the something became available to people who wanted to use it against you. She cannot be here when they move, he said. Agreed. Sir, she needs to be somewhere we can. She goes nowhere she does not choose to go, he said. I will talk to her. He ended the call. He sat at the kitchen table. He heard Lara come out of the bedroom. He heard her footsteps. He heard the specific sound of her pausing in the kitchen doorway because she had developed, over 6 months, the particular instinct for when the quality of his stillness communicated something other than ordinary quiet. What happened? She was curious. He turned around. He told her everything. Not the summary. The full version. Who Beck was, what his faction wanted, what leverage meant in the context of the organization, what the threat looked like in practical terms, what he intended to do about it. She listened. She stood in the kitchen doorway in her school outfit with her marking pen in her hand, and she listened to the whole thing with the complete quality of a woman who needed to understand every part of something before she responded. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? She wanted to know. He looked at her. Nothing, he said. I need you to let me handle it. And if I told you I was not going to change my routine or my life because someone I have never met has decided to use me as a tool? He looked at her. I would tell you that I understand why you feel that way and that I am asking you to trust me. Not because you owe me trust. Because I am asking. She looked at him for a long time. How long? She said. 2 weeks. And then it is handled. She looked at him. My Standard 3 has a mathematics assessment in 2 weeks, she said. I am not missing it. You will not miss it. And the plants need watering on Thursday. The large one is particular about being on time. I will water the plant, he said. She looked at him. Handle it, she said. And she went to school. He called Huang. What followed was 2 weeks that Taejean had decided, before they began, would be the most precise and the most final operation he had ever run. Not the largest, not the most complex, but the most final, because he had also decided that the cost of what Beck's faction had attempted was not a cost that could be absorbed within the existing structure. Beck had miscalculated the one thing that could not be miscalculated, not Taejean's operational response, but the specific quality of what he was protecting. He was not protecting a resource. He was not protecting an asset. He was protecting a primary school teacher in Kilimani who mailed money back to people who owed her nothing and opened her door to strangers in the rain and had told him, 6 months ago in her kitchen, that what he needed was some interior load-bearing walls. Beck had never met anyone like that. He had no framework for understanding what it meant to a man like Tae-jin. The precision of what followed was the most complete of Tae-jin's career. Beck's faction was dismantled, not violently, not dramatically, systematically. Every financial instrument, every operational relationship, every connection within and outside the organization that Beck had spent 14 months assembling was addressed with the specific methodical efficiency of a man who had assessed the structure and identified every load-bearing point. Beck himself was removed from the organization with the specific finality that Tae-jin reserved for situations that could not be allowed to recur. On the 14th day, Huang called. "It is handled," he said. Tae-jin was already at the airport. He was in Nairobi by evening. He walked up 3 flights of stairs. The elevator was not working, and he had come to find this specific detail comforting in the way that consistent things become comforting, and knocked on her door. 3 knocks. The same rhythm. She opened the door. She looked at him for a moment. "Did you water the plant?" she wanted to know. "Twice," he said. "Thursday and Saturday. It is particular about Thursday." Something happened to her expression. Something that was not quite the composed quality she brought to everything, but the specific full warmth of a woman who has assessed a man across 6 months and 14 difficult days and has arrived at a conclusion she is entirely at peace with. She stepped back from the door. "The ugali is on the stove," she told him. "Come in." He came in. He closed the door behind him. He stood in her kitchen in the warm lamplight with the Han River. No, with the Nairobi night, her Nairobi night. Visible through the kitchen window, the 3 plants on the balcony, the shelf of books along the eastern wall, the coffee cup in its specific position on the counter, the ugali on the stove, and the smell of the beef stew that had been his first real meal in 11 years coming from the pot she had given him time to finish. She handed him a wooden spoon. "Stir," she politely instructed him. "Clockwise. Don't let it stick." He stirred the ugali. "Clockwise. Careful." With the specific attention he brought to everything she told him, because he had assessed, over 6 months and 14 difficult days, that what Lara Burowo told him to do was always precisely correct. She sat at the kitchen table and opened her marking and began to work through the standard 3 mathematics assessments with the specific focused absorption of a woman entirely in her element. He stirred the ugali and watched her mark papers and felt the specific completeness of a structure that has finally been correctly assembled. The interior walls in place, the load-bearing elements distributed correctly, nothing decorative taking the place of something structural. "The assessment," Tae-jin noted. "They did well," she said without looking up. "Michael Aching got full marks. He has been working very hard." "You told me about Michael Aching," he recalled. "Last month." "I know," Lara affirmed. "You remembered." He stirred the ugali. "Tae-jin," she said. "Yes." She looked up from the marking. "When you restructure whatever you need to restructure to make this work." "I am already restructuring it," he noted. She looked at him. "I know," Lara responded. "I am asking you to do it correctly. Not for me. For you. Because you spent 8 years building something with no interior walls, and you are very good at building things, and I think it is time you built something that lasts." He looked at her across the kitchen. "I am taking instruction," he said. Something happened to her expression that was the full genuine version of the warmth she had been giving him in careful measured increments for 6 months. The whole thing, present and unmanaged and entirely hers. "Good," she noted with excitement. And she went back to marking. He stirred the ugali. Clockwise. Patient. Careful. The Nairobi night outside the window. The 3 plants on the balcony. The shelf of books. The standard 3 mathematics assessments on the kitchen table. The most feared man in Seoul standing at a stove in a 3rd-floor apartment where the elevator had not worked since 2019, stirring ugali clockwise because a primary school teacher had told him not to let it stick. He had knocked on her door soaking wet and shivering 7 months ago. By morning, 12 black cars had been parked on her street. Neither of those things was the most significant thing that had happened between midnight and sunrise. The most significant thing was the ugali. The blanket. The matter-of-fact instruction not to touch the plants. The most significant thing was a woman who opened her door in the rain because her mother had raised her that way and had never found a compelling reason to stop. And the man who had spent 7 months calculating, with the precision he brought to everything, exactly what that was worth. The answer, he had determined, was everything. And so he stood in her kitchen and stirred the ugali and understood, for the first time in 36 years, what it meant to be in the right place. So tell me, did you think Tae-jin would stay in Seoul or come back to Nairobi? And which moment changed everything for you? The mailed money, the I came to understand why, or the ugali at the end? Drop your city in the comments and tell me what you think. If this story moved you, subscribe to Afro Soul Connect and send it to someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who opened her door in the rain and changed the accounting of a man's entire life. We will see you in the next one.